Wow, that was quick. It went live in an instant. Welcome to Shifting from Grudge to Grit, Grace, and Gratitude, where the focus of these conversations is always about the hero's journey and how you accepted that course of adventure. Let me switch off. I see I am live and hearing myself on Instagram. I'm going to mute Instagram. There we go. Welcome, Corbin. I mean, when I saw Corbin's amazing, humble, down to earth beginnings around his profile, I was in awe, and I felt almost honored and privileged that he felt happy to come and join us in this conversation and share his own hero's journey and where he started off, as well as giving us some insight in hacking our personality, our emotions, and what else are we talking about today? Our archetypes, right? And I can't wait to get this conversation going. I just want to say Jamila will be joining us. She is running a little bit late. And as we know, the universe with technology, sometimes we do have challenges. Corbin, what I didn't say to you before we went live, if that happens, please just engage the audience, keep them going. And we will invite your questions, your contributions, your valuable insights. Please don't make it easier for Corbin because he is an expert in his own right, but do ask him any questions. And so I'm going to let him greet us before I share a bit of his bio. Over to you, Corbin, just to say hi to our audience.
Well, hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you. It's my morning here in Phoenix, Arizona, in the US. But it is a pleasure to be taking this message internationally. And I'm so honored to be here and share into the hero's journey now that I've really found my calling, and I'm here to answer it.
Yes. So, for those that are joining, you are in for a delightful treat. So, let's read a little bit about Corbin. You know, at just 9 years old, he led a campaign to plant 280,000 plus trees across 3 countries. He has been divinely guided from a young age, as you can hear. By 11, he co authored the ABCs of Becoming Great. As a filmmaker, he directed the award winning Netflix documentary Bite Size, featured on MSNBC, Fox, BBC Radio, People magazine, and more. So, Corbin uses personality science and emotional intelligence to help people transform their reality, heal relationships, and to choose love over division. Known for his remarkable achievements from a very young age, he was also a motivational speaker at only the tender age of 9 years old. So that campaign to plant trees happened across the US, France, Canada. I mean, what happens at 9? I mean, we want to play outside and get all dirty in the mud. And he's thinking about, planting trees, somewhat a little bit in some form of mud, I suppose, but in a different sense. He leverages his storytelling prowess and personality expertise to help people raise their emotional intelligence, improve their communication skills, and to find peace. His goal is to empower others to heal their relationships, overcome division, and choose love. In a polarized world, he is a mission-driven advocate for connection and unity. Corbin helps people of all ages transform their reality and rewrite the stories they tell themselves. So, without further ado, I mean, I can't wait to dig in just wherever you feel drawn to start, whether it is whatever's behind you in your background there, or whether it is why you felt so drawn and called to these adventures at a very young age.
Well, let me just say this. I'm a friend of the trees. And in fact, a lot of the model that we'll be discussing these colors through is actually based around the metaphor of a tree. I think it's so representative of the structure of our reality and our planet. It's literally what gives us life. And the reason why I decided to start that campaign, which started, as a pipe dream, but also a little bit more modestly, it was 1,000 trees in my home state of Oklahoma by the end of 1998. And that was the result of my mother's influence. She had just written a book on parenting techniques and calling children to greatness. And so she would sort of ask me, Corbin, what great things are you going to do for you in your world today? And at the same time, I was asked and sort of challenged to listen to success tapes before going to bed, and also watch motivational speeches on television. And if I was really good and I put my hours in, then I got a new Beanie Baby at the end of the week. This is the 90s. And so I was all for it. And then I was on side 2 of The Science of Self-Confidence by Brian Tracy in the middle of the night. And I shot up out of bed. I said, I need to set a goal that's bigger than me. I had just been diagnosed with restrictive air disease, which is like severe allergies, and told by my doctor that it was caused in part by pollution and poor air quality. And so this desire within me was, well, we can plant 1,000 trees and we can clean up the air. And that campaign and that desire to speak to anyone that would listen to me as a 9-year-old eventually led to what National Geographic called me the new Johnny Appleseed kid. Now, that was a wonderful, upbringing, and it really taught me in life that anything is possible. Now, you want to carry that kind of novelty and success into your adult career. That led me into filmmaking, and it was much harder to really break through, and led to a lot of sort of frustration, challenges in my life where I was seeking to refine what is that personal treasure for me. Is it being Steven Spielberg? Is it something more having to do with the ego of Hollywood? Or is my mission more to reach people, empower them, give them the tools that they need to better their lives? And ultimately, that's where I found my calling more recently. And interestingly enough, this is once again rooted in my mother. She spent 40 years as a counselor and psychologist working with families. And the model behind me is something that she created that was called Primary Colors. And it's a personality assessment tool. This was licensed as a paper test for about 40 years in the United States by leading relationship researchers. And it was used in military organizations, educational system. Now, I had traveled, by the time that I reached my 30s, across the world, going to Africa and South America, Asia, looking for the secrets to connection and meaning in life, and how we create that unity or revive the spirit of Ubuntu. And it wasn't until I found this pamphlet, 4 pages in a drawer in my mother's study, that I went, wow, this is actually the secret. And since that time, we have worked really hard in order to transform the paper test into an online app that anyone can go and take. And it's really simple, fun, and easy, and so insightful, not only about yourself, but then you get the opportunity to have other people that you love take the test, their colors. And really this applies to, like, what's their outlook? What's their perspective and how they see the world? Because somebody could look up at the sky and you say, what color is it? And they'd say blue. And then you'd say, well, no, clearly the sky is red. I don't understand. You must be, an idiot here, or you must be just trying to fool me. And it really is sometimes that simple, that we come into our lives with these default perspectives or outlooks, but they're invisible to us because they've always been there. We have this opportunity to kind of lift them up, and then we can exchange our lenses for somebody else's. And we can go, oh my gosh, this is how you see the world. Well, maybe I shouldn't necessarily fight you. Maybe there's something that I could learn from you.
So I want to go back. The first thing I heard you say was, whatever the challenge was became the pursuit of what the purpose was going to be. So having the health challenges at the beginning was like, but hold on, am I going to stay a victim of this particular debilitating diagnosis? Or what can I do about it? I find that interesting because you, at that young age, said, well, along with your mom, I mean, I have the utmost respect to your mom. I want to one day meet her. Is she still with us in this earthly realm?
She is. She's just not here right now. I'm sure that you could have her on the podcast.
Would
But
love to meet her.
she's an incredible individual, and really, this is where we're going with this. But the reason that I had to become familiar with this technology was in order to salvage our relationship, because around
Your,
2020, between my mother and I, we had reached
Mhm.
a point where our relationship was severely damaged and needed a lot of love and attention in order to be repaired. Needed a lot of
Are you willing
understanding.
to share? Are you willing to share what was the almost the catalyst to the relationship breaking?
Absolutely.
Is that something you want to go to?
Yeah, it's something that I'll be talking about for the rest of my life, and is also detailed in our book, The Personality Color Matrix, the transformative tool to unlock joy, upgrade your awareness, and reconnect. It comes out July 25th. But the
Mm,
core essence here is that I'm a recovering arguholic. It comes as a result of my strong blue tendencies. But when those blue tendencies enter their extreme, there's no hill small enough for me to die on in an argument. And
mm,
so I woke up one morning feeling particularly righteous in 2020, and found about 20 posts that she had made on Facebook. And I went in with a lot of righteous energy and just dismantled them.
mm,
Whatever I presumed or perceived to be misinformation or bias. And that, I expected her to unfriend me. I expected her to block me. I mean, those were situations that I was prepared for. They may have been a relief. What I didn't anticipate was that she would show up at my door a couple of days later and essentially say that while she loved me, she needed to take a step back from our relationship. It wasn't safe.
mm,
And
mm,
so there I am, realizing that I have sacrificed the relationship with the woman that gave me life for imaginary points on a Facebook scoreboard.
sure.
And I wanted to do everything that I could in order to fix that. I didn't want to be
Mm,
essentially disowned. That's very much what it felt like. And so I went back, and we see the world through two very, very different perspectives. There's a generational divide inherently. She's a little bit more of a boomer. I'm a millennial. And so there's a point where I would just disregard her perspective. I would say, you're willfully blind. You just don't see it. How can you not see
mm,
it? You must be ignorant. And she would say, I worked for 40 years, written and read many books, developed all of this technology for you to see that there's no value or wisdom in that, just
mm,
because we disagree in how we see the world. Do you really think that that's the right approach? And so it was hard, but I had to really lean in to figuring out how to learn how to find value and wisdom and perspectives that I was rejecting. That's the core of our technology. And then I dove in, and for me it was literally like I was Neo in the Matrix. He's posed with, are
mm.
you going to take the blue pill or the red
The
pill?
red or the blue pill. Yes.
For me, it was taking the blue pill, the red pill, the purple pill, the green pill, the yellow pill, and the orange pill. And then I was suddenly awake to this color matrix. Now I could
Mm,
see the colors in people's language. I could see it in communication. So suddenly I knew how to listen. I knew how to speak better to them. And as somebody who maybe has stunted emotional intelligence because my IQ is a little bit higher, like for me,
mm,
it's sometimes social intelligence it's learned behavior. Let's just say that.
mm,
This gave me
mm,
a tool to really understand not only how to strengthen my relationships, but strengthen my professional sales and career, and connect, but also be way more aware of my pitfalls, my shortcomings, because
mm,
all of these colors are associated with these beautiful qualities in their center. But when they go into their extreme, and that's maybe a trigger point, then they transform and they're unrecognizable. They
mm.
all have this quality where they can become distorted, extreme versions of themselves. So the goal is
Yeah.
always to figure out, well, what are your extremes? How do you avoid that? How do you return to center? And that structure, um, it changed the way that I saw my mother.
Mm,
So,
mm,
there And it also helped me understand this key concept of empathy. So I'm a father now, and when I wrote those messages on my mother's Facebook, I wasn't. But there was a
Mm-hmm.
point where I was imagining myself waking up to the bombardment of judgment from somebody that I had invested so much time in loving and supporting, doing everything that I could. It was so humbling to shift my paradigm and briefly go into her lens, and then I took a full accountability, and then stepped into a role of saying, okay, I want to be somebody who you can pass this torch to, and I can carry this on as a beacon for people moving forward, because I believe the technology is so vital. And so I've taken it on as my new mission. Um, and in that, honoring her, we do this thing in our family where it's like finding somebody's center and then choosing that they'll inevitably go into their extreme. It's like missing the mark sometimes, but you hold on to that center because it's the reality of who they are. It's who we fall in love with. And then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, this extreme comes out, and we say to the person, I don't know who you are anymore. This isn't who I fell in love with. This isn't who I married. Um, and then we can maybe say, well, that's who you are. Now I know the real you. Oh, I've seen through your fake mask, but it's really that center is the reality of someone. We hold on to that. And so it's akin to putting a superhero insignia or letter on somebody's chest. And so there's this period with my mother where I would always want to put a big B on her chest. That's for bossy, for bossy.
Yes.
And then I got to this point where I said, no, Corbin, she's created this entire technology that really helps people improve their communication, reduce conflict. She is a wise healing oracle, and you're going to put those
Oh.
letters who on her chest, so that anytime that you find yourself in that situation, you're going to remember who she is. And that really speaks to the concept that we teach is, you have to, in order to be willing to find and learn from the other side, you have to hold on to the center value, the good things, positive, constructive contributions, as opposed to the extreme outlying opposition, because sometimes the actual interpretation of opposition is literally just a complementariness. And this is the polarity that's at the core of our technology. We have this one side over here called strength, and then this other side over here called warmth. 3 colors in strength, 3 colors in warmth. And they constantly could seem like they're at odds, but the reality is that they are complements. This wouldn't be a complete circle without them.
So you said wise hero oracle.
Wise healing oracle.
Healing. Well, I replaced it with hero for some reason, but she is a hero.
that also applies.
So, what I was wanting to say earlier on is it's interesting that when we are between 0 and 7, the sky's the limit. There's no, I don't even think the sky's the limit. It's like there's limitless possibilities. We think that everything is possible, nothing is impossible. And then our perception and a term that I've learned is our saboteurs, our shadow sides, start to take center stage from about 8 onwards, right? So in the beginning, our brains are so malleable, and it still is malleable, but we're now being influenced based on the way we perceive our environment or those colors and the way we sort of identify with different individuals. And as you rightfully state, there are polarities, but they are complementary. And so in the same way that we're talking about heroes, there's also the villain side within us, our inner demons. But often we are taught to almost disregard it, shame it, suppress it, when actually innately that is meant to be a part of us. But how we nurture it is when you're coming back to that centerpiece that you're referring to. So being a recovering alcoholic, that was a vice. And you were going and growing through, if my understanding is correct, your own dark night of the soul experience. And it was a necessary experience to be in that mud and sit in the dirt of it all, have that relationship, excuse me, become estranged, and almost being the catalyzer for you to become awakened or woken up from the slumber that you potentially were in around this is I know better, right? Because the I know better is I, me, mine, which is the egoic self.
Mhm.
But what I'm hearing from you is that the transcendence was how do I transmute that part of myself that had the higher IQ and I knew better, and how dare she come and present things on Facebook that's actually not making sense because that was based on your lens of the world, your protective guardians, I call it, which is the saboteurs, on how you saw the lens of your own world and how you wanted to kind of enforce that onto project it onto
Mhm.
everyone else, right? But it
Yeah.
takes a special experience like that to bring you back. And then what did it take for you to go and say, you know what? The villain in me was very much alive. Thank you for loving me, all parts of me,
Mm.
and loving me enough to say, I need to step away from the relationship because it's not safe to me. What was your next step in that evolution of that relationship that brought you back?
Mm. So I want to just specify really quick, recovering arguholic. That's kind of a joke.
Oh,
I
did you
wasn't
say
exactly, never had a problem with alcohol, but recovering arguholic, which speaks into my need to continually be right and be,
apologies?
no, but in my ego, but it's not to say that I don't have my vices, but that's not one of them. The,
Yeah,
the issue that I was dealing with was my extreme. And in many ways we identify and relate the extreme to the Jungian shadow self.
yes,
So
yes,
the first step is really, if are we aware of it or are we in denial of it? So one of the beautiful things with our technology is that, yeah, we're going to, by assessing an individual's personality in different contexts, because that's also important. Our personalities are fluid and they change in our environments. We're not the same person at work as we are at home. But when we
yes,
when we take that analysis and we understand, okay, well, what are your three colors that are showing up strongest here? Well, we also get a great indication of your strengths, and these strengths are things that you're actually usually aware of, because people have reflected and projected back to you that these are great positive attributes about yourself.
mm,
That now, when we want to flip that coin and we want to start looking at what are our pitfalls or shortcomings where we tend to shoot ourselves in the foot, these also get revealed by our personality color blend. And that's almost the waking up process. It's akin to
mm,
awakening, and why the name of our company has shifted from primary colors and this. Well, it's not to say that primary colors doesn't already exist. It's great. It's wonderful. It's very simple and accessible. This new thing emerged, the personality color matrix, which is exceedingly simple, built on the same subject matter, but goes so deep. And if you really want to see how deep the understanding goes in that rabbit hole, you're invited to join us on that journey. But hello.
sorry about it. I see
Hi.
Jamila's just joined us.
So
Welcome, Jamila. We're
Hello,
going to ask
thank
you
you, Lisa.
to say hi quickly, and then I'm going to go over back to Corbin because he's in the midst of really introducing and giving context to this color wheel that's up on the screen. And then there's a lot of background noise on your side, my darling.
Yes, so don't worry about me. Hi, everybody. Let's please continue.
all right. Well, so we have the ability to look at not only what are we consciously aware are our great qualities, but what are we asleep to about ourselves? What's our subconscious um, doing that sometimes sabotages our behavior? And this is what you were talking about earlier. So I'll just start with the real thing that woke me, or when I woke up that morning and decided to attack my mother's Facebook page. What was going on was that I have, just by nature, very strong blue personality tendencies. So
Mhm.
when I look at the world, I'm seeing them rather through blue lenses. The, like blue personality tendencies are defined by ingenuity, problem solvers, love getting into the details of things, understanding how they work, taking something apart, putting it back together. These people actually read the instruction manuals. They don't just jump to immediately using the product. Now, you take all of that curiosity, you take that openness to information, and then you put
Mhm.
it into its extreme. And I'd love to touch on in a second what is that point where we shift from our center into our extreme. But in the extreme, blue tendencies become arrogant. I know it all. I'm very confrontational because you don't know your facts. Anybody who doesn't see the world the way that I do is an idiot.
Yeah.
Now, at that point, you are incredibly dismissive of information
Mhm.
as opposed to being
Mhm.
open to it. You're critical. Now, blue tendencies have a tendency to find the faults in things. It's because they want to constantly test the integrity. So you have them on a team environment, and it can be like, why is Gary always being so negative? It's not that Gary's trying to be negative. It's just that he's got this natural ability to be like, hey, that doesn't add up. That's not going to work. And so there is a desire to contribute and make something stronger or better. But the blues love honesty, and so
Mhm.
they want to provide that constructive criticism. Anyway, then you get to the fact where they'll be really way too honest, and they will dismantle you with a look because it's so condescending. And this is very much that sharpness that my mother was encountering in our dynamic. Now, nobody is ever
Mhm.
just one color. You're always a blend, and we always
Yeah.
look at your top 3 colors that are showing up in any context. But in this particular dynamic with my mother, I would put on these blue lenses in my extreme, and honestly just be a bit of a bastard. And I had to figure out and take accountability for that and say, okay, well, what is it in me that needs to be right? Why is this such a strong desire?
Mhm.
And in that it would actually take priority over my relationships. So there's this concept where if I'm in an extreme state of mind through one color, well, you know what we were talking about earlier, learn to find the value and wisdom in the side that you reject. So I look at my
Mhm.
complementary across the color wheel, and I have orange personality tendencies. And this is all about fun, mirth, finding inspiration and breathing that into people, thrill seeking, self joy, and really humor, being an entertainer. It's
Mhm.
so much less serious than that analytical, logical way of seeing the world. It's much more about the experience and the mirth. And
Mhm.
the interesting thing, though, is when you're in that party mentality, sure, it's so much fun. Now we want to take that into the extreme. I'm now an addict. I now am so
Mhm.
impulsive that I'm not ever thinking through the consequences of my behavior, and it's constantly um, putting me backwards or step and then I'm being manipulative. I'm lying to people or stretching the truth in order to get away with being able to do whatever I want to do, my vices. And so we see this destructive impulsivity that lives within that extreme orange. Well, at that point, best thing that you could do is think before you act and tap into that considerate, thoughtful blue center. And
Mhm.
so the way that this whole technology works is that if you are in an extreme state of mind that is particularly associated or reflective of one color, well, look at the centered attributes of its complement, and that will create a pathway for you to shift that headspace. Now, that the issue is that it's a momentary thing. So you say, what's the first thing that you did in order to repair that relationship with your mother? It's like awakening to the fact that these problems, or that it's not even necessarily problems, that these um, these possibilities of pitfalls, these
Mhm.
potentialities for destroying my relationships and sabotaging my own happiness existed. Then it became, well, how do I shift that behavior? Like, and that maybe is as a momentary mental shift that I can go and say, okay, well, stop being so blue, go into your orange and I have this thing where there's an energy in my family where we call it Santa. on Christmas, I happen to come in like a Santa cap, and I bring hot chocolate and a whole bunch of cheer. My mother loves nothing more than my Santa energy, which is tapping into a lot of that strong orange. So when I bring that humor, as opposed to, hey, I gotcha, I found this thing that's not matching on, and then somehow she feels cornered, targeted. So how do you then, once you have that ability to maybe momentarily shift your perspective, man, you want to shift your behavior from, like, let's say, hour to hour, day to day, week to week, month to month. It's actually gets more complicated, because there's ingrained neural pathways where you can have a momentary aha moment. In order to truly transform that behavior, it actually takes intentionality and routine. So, but anyway, that's the answers. I had to figure out, well, what are my pitfalls? How do I actually navigate out of that? Now, how do I schedule and transform my behavior so that I do that routinely, so that my mother actually has confidence? Because it's one thing to say with words, oh, hey, I figured it out, you're safe now. You need to show a track record over a long period of time of you being able to maintain and be in the center, as opposed to straying to the extremes, in order to actually allow that confidence to just naturally, because it'll build up in yourself over time, but then it naturally radiates out of you into your aura, and then other people have more confidence in you when they observe you.
You know, you were talking about the trees earlier on, and then you used the word rooted, and I want to come back to, I mean, I want to know more. I want to know all the colors. I almost like, but I want to keep it grounded in this practical example, so that the audience can resonate to the story, to this narrative, to this conditioning, this programming that probably exists within all of, no, not probably, that does exist within all of us. How, does this connect to the metaphorical sense of trees?
I love that question.
You spoke earlier on around the challenge in your health and how that became purposeful, your pursuit, and how you had that defining experience with your mom. So what does the role of trees play here? And how can we get this rooted within our lives using the metaphor of trees?
I love that. So the color wheel that you see here, it has two sides to it. And we identify one of those sides as warmth. That would be the colors orange, yellow, and green. And then we identify the other half of the color wheel as strength. And that'd be red, purple, and blue. Now, these are two different sides. So there is two, but it's also one circle. So it's one. And we have to kind of harken back to the concept of the yin and yang, or yin and yang. It's that polarity. So let's think about the concept of a tree. We, of course, have the branches that extend from the trunk. This is sort of the visible part, the as above that we observe. But then beneath the surface, we've also got our roots. And this creates this reflective dynamic. Now, the mentalities and the approaches of these two sides, although they're one tree, is fundamentally different. Within the branches, you have total potential for growth and expansion. There's also the creativity and the fruition, literal fruit, that comes from the branches. And to a degree, it's almost like that seemingly is the purpose of the tree. It's to make things beautiful and to flourish, be vibrant. And in a way, this relates to human pursuits of art, dance, and meaning making. It speaks to the fruit of our relationships and giving birth to children, but also families, but also creative projects. And the thing about the warmth in these branches is that it's very flexible. In a way, it's almost capricious, because it has to be able to move with the wind. And this is where we get to the concept of the femininity sometimes being related to the ocean, because there's this constant flux, and there has to be this ability to be fluid. Now, we want to look at the other side of the tree, the roots. And these roots are not flexible. In fact, they're very dug into their ways. But that actually creates a very firm foundation and an infrastructure that facilitates the health and the sustenance, the survival of the tree.
Mhm.
If we didn't have the roots delivering the essential nutrition up
Mm.
to the branches, we wouldn't actually even see any fruit to begin with. But there is a point where all of that is beneath the surface. It's like behind a curtain or the dirty work. And
Mm.
there gets a point where the branches could almost look down and say, well, yeah, what are the roots even doing? We never see them around. And so, and then you get to a point where the roots are looking up at the branches and they're going, what a bunch of fruits. This
Mm.
gets down to the core of what's happening in our Western culture war. There's
Yes.
that strength is associated with a lot more of the masculine, and with it,
Mm.
a holding on to tradition. Once again, you want to think about the roots. That firm foundation also provides the fact that the tree can exist, but there's no beauty to it. And so when
Mm.
you live in an overly strength, um, in an environment that's dominated by strength, there's no color, there's no individuality. You kind of get into that
Mm.
1984 or Brave New World dystopia, where everything is the same or is given a number as opposed to an individuation. And
Yes.
so there exists within this the extremes on both sides. That extreme warmth gets to a place where it becomes entrenched in
Mm.
victimhood,
Yes.
righteous morality, uh, idealism, and escapism. And these all
Mm.
relate to various colors that are on that side of the wheel in their extremes. Then you get to the other side of that extreme strength, and you get into domination, bullying, censorship, that
Mm.
much more authoritarian control and restrictiveness. Now,
Yes.
in the center, both of these qualities merge together and they're so harmonious, but then in their extreme, it's almost like magnets. You try to put the magnets in, they repulse each other.
Mm.
It's so hard for warmth to find any. Well, you could say it like this: the strength people might look at the warmth people and say you're naive, and then the
Mm.
warmth people would look at the strength people and say you're heartless. And so both sides will end up going to war with each other. And so now what's happening with that tree is that it's holding an axe, both the roots and the branches are, and they're hacking at that middle. And
Mm.
what's the result of that tree? Is it going to survive? No, it's going to turn into a stump either way.
Yes.
There's this idea in our society, and this also speaks to what Nelson Mandela specifically was able to heal, but that
Mhm.
there's this concept of righteous excision. If I was able to cut you out, I would be better off. It would be as if I was removing a tumor. But the
Mhm.
reality is that it's not a separate self. Like we were pointing out at the beginning, these circles, even though it's two sides, it's one. And it
Yes.
was Abraham Lincoln quoting Jesus who said, "A house divided cannot stand."
Mm.
So we get to this point where through our culture war and these extremes, really fighting and hacking away at that center, where there's no more trunk left, and with that, the ability for our civilization to continue to communicate and thrive goes by the wayside. We sacrifice the relationships. Now, this is equivalent to what happened between me and my mother, because
Mm.
to a degree, I was approaching my perspective just from a warmth-minded perspective. My mother
Yes.
was approaching everything from a very strength-minded perspective, and so we were hacking at that trunk of our own relationship. And then there becomes a point where you say, "No more. I would rather identify I am one with this, um,
Yes.
and then seek to." It really comes down to remembering too. We have to
Mm.
remember who we are, re-put that together, remember that love, remember that she's a wise healing oracle as opposed to anything else. And then that allows us to step into a place where I can go, okay, the greatest lesson in life that can be learned by warmth, by the branches. They're so good at letting go and having grace and moving on with life when tragedy befalls them, in their center. Well, then you ask them to take accountability it kind of feels like I'm being targeted now. I want to get out of
Mhm.
it. You need to be sensitive to the way that, I am, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, the greatest lesson that Warm can learn is taking accountability. Now you put it over into strength. The greatest lesson that strength can learn, well, they naturally take accountability. They're all about responsibility. Give me more. Now ask them to let go of something, have grace, forgive. Real struggle, hard to forget. So these two sides, the essential wisdom that they're seeking lies in the other. If only they could be in the room with them long enough to learn them.
Wow, Corbin, as we are talking, there's so much coming up for me. And we're using the metaphorical sense of a tree, but I almost feel like we could weave in all the elements: earth, fire, wind. What's the other one? I've lost it there.
The aether is certainly alive. And this gets into this interesting thing that what is the elements and the nature and structure of our reality. I'll just say this to your listeners, right? I don't know if we'll have all the opportunity to get into all of the colors today, but we're actually doing a webinar on April 8th that you can sign up for. There should be a link where we're going to actually be diving into all of these colors. And that would be a wonderful introduction. But that being said, the wonderful thing is that we get to unlock wisdom in our counterparts and remend together. Anissa, can you remind me what your leading question there was?
So where I was going to head with this is the way you described sort of the polarities and how each of these attributes are actually interdependent of one another. And so where my energy and mindset and everything was heading towards is like the tree being so rooted, but it cannot survive or thrive, rather, I want to use as the word, without the elements of the wind, of water, etc., etc. So yes, sometimes the storm comes along, but the roots remain so rooted that that tree cannot be destroyed in any shape or form. Yet when the wind shows up, it can potentially be unrooted. I don't know where I'm going with this, but it just feels like if we could get to a point of knowing that the synergy between our relationships with ourselves is to be deeply guided, knowing that we can't be one without the other. We can't be the warmth and not the strength. They have to work together synergistically to create the harmony. But first and foremost, within ourselves, if we have the awareness, that's the first part of this. And from awareness is the navigation that you spoke about. How do we then navigate this to make sure that we become back to center, almost return home to ourselves, essentially, instead of being so dominantly one-sided? I see there's a comment from Jeffrey. Yes, Jeffrey, there is a core mother wound where both sides are struggling to validate exiled parts. This creates a drama struggle based in a need to control and manage these rejected oasis and on the part of both individuals. That's a very, very insightful comment there. It's balancing between the divine, feminine, masculine, and so I would say this side of the wheel, the blue, the purple, the strength is in the masculine, where, it is guided through ego and my way, which that hyper rational state of being. Whereas the other side is the divine feminine, the nurturing. And if I bring the elements factor in, it's the water. What else would you contribute to that, Corbin? Because I'm very intrigued by this, and I don't think we're going to have everything covered today. But I most certainly want to invite those to join in on that webinar. I'll put it also into my LinkedIn post, because showing it up on the screen is not necessarily going to click through to the link.
Sure.
But I do want you to respond to Jeffrey. That's a very insightful comment. And then also maybe tap into how does the elements play a role, seeing that we've used the metaphor of a tree.
Yeah. So As far as it relates, we're all the colors, right? So what your in first note there about it
Mhm.
requires all of the elements to be present in order for the magic to happen is totally right on the money.
Mhm.
And whenever we evaluate personality in different contexts, because that's what our technology is really unique in that it does it, we'll see different colors pop up in different situations in life or emotional context. And
Mhm.
so there is such an opportunity to have a much more holistic understanding of yourself. One of the other things that's beautiful about this technology is that it really is based in six personality color tendencies, and that is the way that our nature naturally builds. This is going to kind of go back a little bit to the concept of the tree here, but the I would challenge any of our listeners, right, to go out on a hike in nature and find me a square in the woods. It doesn't exist. It's sort of a construction of our ego and how we build that way. When we look at nature and how it naturally forms connections, the first shape in our geometry is the hexagon. It's what shows
Mhm.
up in the soap bubble or the insect eye or the honeycomb in the beehive. And that connects in molecules that bind proteins in our cells. So isn't it so perfectly as above, so below that this is how personality itself comes together and intertwines? And I do think that there is a two within one to that, where we do identify the strength side of the wheel as being more masculine and thinking more with their head. In saying that, the
Mhm.
warmth side of the color wheel more feminine, feeling more with their heart. And
Mhm.
there is more of a quality to sometimes you want to call it chaos in its extreme version, but there is that fluidity, that ocean quality
Mhm.
associated with warmth, like you said, water, versus the strength is very solid. It would be akin to the lighthouse. That and both of those are necessary, the lighthouse and the motion of the ocean, in order to deliver the relationship successfully. So it's that dance that goes together. Now
Mhm.
this gets back to the question. Uh, it's definitely if we're talking about my own life, yeah, there's definitely a big mother wound in there that we've been seeking to use this technology in order to understand, and it may even be within it that warmth is
Mhm.
representing the divine mother, in which strength is rejecting in some cases or needing to learn from, and then there is this aspect of the divine father
Mhm.
that in some ways is harder for the warmth to answer to and to take accountability. And so
Mhm.
this is an astute observation. Um, let's see.
He says, let me just enlarge the screen. I am juggling
I have to
between
I have to read
screens.
it backwards.
Parataxic distortion and transference. Spot on, Jeffrey. So, what is transference and what exactly is parataxic distortion? I mean, this is really deep stuff, guys. And it's the light and the dark, it's the duality and the polarities that we're referring to, because there's so many parallels between the ecosystem within this wheel and just overall the ecosystem within life in and of
Mhm.
itself, and the parallels that exist is there, but it's being discerning around knowing and having that awareness in what is parataxic distortion and what is transference. Jeffrey, please do come in here and elaborate on that if I haven't done it much justice, and then I'm going to hand over to you, Corbin. Just an apology on Jamila's side, in case you're wondering where she's gone. There's some stormy weather in Johannesburg, and unfortunately, connectivity, as the universe plays its role, has pushed her out of the conversation. And Corbin, she apologizes because she was really looking forward to this conversation and contributing and sharing in the conversation.
Oh well, no, we missed her. Hopefully, we can continue the conversation again, and then she can join us for that one here in spirit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's this thing that I want to touch on, and what is that moment where these colors will shift from a harmonious state into their extreme? What
Mhm.
is that moment when our shadow self really emerges? And as far as I understand it right now, there's this moment where narcissistic entitlement comes into
Mm-hmm.
play in our reality. And by that, I mean that we look out at our reality and we perceive lack. And in that scarcity mindset, feel that we deserve more.
Mm-hmm.
And this could be very much the ego aspect of it, right? And so, and then in that feeling of deserving for more, we make ourselves unsatisfied. We make ourselves miserable because we are focusing on our lack as opposed to our blessings. And then the opportunity to return to center, to navigate out of a place of narcissistic entitlement, which could very well be the root of all conflict and misery in our relationships. It is the appreciation that offers that
Mm-hmm.
cure. That is the elixir that we can return with at the end of our hero's journey.
Yes.
That is the antidote to the entitlement. It's the concept of endowment. When I look around my world, how much abundancy do I observe and perceive as opposed to that lack? And when I'm concentrating on the blessings, I find myself infused with so much more joy and gratitude.
So he says there's another comment before this, but let me just read this. The hero becomes an exile we reject. An exile. I can relate to that. And then he asks a question. How does this complex color system serve as an unconscious attempt to control these dynamics? Love that question, Jeffrey. I have a sense, I know where you're heading with that. The internal manager parts are unconsciously attempting to repress unresolved primary patterns. And again, I suppose these are, what are those constructs, those beliefs, that narratives that shapes our view of the world, and what of these are in the unconscious environments, and what do we need to do to make the unconscious conscious? However, at what point does it control these dynamics?
Yeah,
Over
my
to you.
answer to that would be that this tool is a wonderful instrument for volitional personality change. So there's a point where we measure not only who you are in a personal context, professional, but also who do you ideally want to be. Based on that metric, we can now kind of algorithmically suggest behaviors or encourage outlooks that allow you to willfully change your personality. For instance, when I take this test, I score very, very low in purple naturally, and have, and that also has become a story and a limiting belief because I score low in purple. Well, I'm not high in purple. Well, then how am I going to go out and carry myself in my reality? So we have to acknowledge that, anytime, especially when we typify people or we give them traits, as personality tests typically do, we say everything is tendency, and this is the box that you put yourself in, not we're putting you in a box. But what are those beliefs? Now, if I know where I'm strong, I also know where I'm a little bit weaker, where my personality tendencies are more dormant. That does give me an opportunity to know what those behaviors are, identify strategies to implement those more, and step into that more ideal version of myself. That would be...
Yeah, I mean, there's some terms here that are very new to me, Jeffrey. Ego diastonic and egosyntonic perspectives are both essential processes. I'd love to learn more about that, and I will connect and probably do my own research around it. But how does this resonate for you in terms of your own? I see there's another comment, and maybe in response to that, it extends beyond ego processes. I suppose, is a central nervous system element and an implicit memory part. Yeah, that resonates. So we only have a few minutes remaining, and I think you're going to have to come back into this conversation. This was too little time for us to really delve in. But in our remaining 6 minutes, as we come to a closure of our conversation, what would you say are the golden nuggets you want to leave the audience with? And what are some practices that can bring us into this oneness, into this grounded sense, into this more rooted or balanced approach to showing up in the world as one and not as divided, and becoming more united in love and being more heart-centered, um, and really living from a place of, I would say, equanimity, which we shared about earlier before we went live, is how do we practice non-attachment? I think is what Jeffrey was trying to say there. Non-attachment to the system, the constructs, the labels, the forms in any shape or form, but really to be balanced, composed, and calm in whichever part of the system we find ourselves in.
Yeah, use the colors as a way to paint your world and to see through. It's almost like the fact that we see in the spectrum of color that we do is not in itself a limitation. I mean, it is the system itself. So we can choose to either see in anything the constraints or the limitations of it, and or we can seek to understand those limitations and therefore find the liberation in it. It's sort of akin to understanding what are your rights, what can't you do, so that you know the full extent of your freedom. That's what the test and the technology ultimately offers. And I think to sum up everything that we've discussed today, my words would be that we're not the same, but we are one. You know, just because we are different doesn't mean that we're actually separate. And we are all of these colors. What colors specifically choose or emerge, you know, we actually have some degree of choice and sovereignty over. So I also want to say, you know, personality is fluid, and it's also in something that you can volitionally change, given the right tools and capacity to self-evaluate and gain personality insight. The last thing that I would say is that insight ends fights. There's this moment when we have the insight that this is just how this person is, and I kind of get to accept it. I get to laugh at it, and I get to have joy in their unique quirks or you know, tendencies, as opposed to be frustrated or annoyed by them. And there is so much power in how we frame our reality. What the tool inherently is about is giving people the opportunity to find value and wisdom in something that they are struggling with, and that could even be the way that a significant other slurps their coffee, you know, when they drink it, and it's like, God, I just can't stand that. But then there becomes this moment where you reflect and you go, okay, well, what's it going to feel like when this person isn't around to slurp the coffee anymore? It may be an invitation to relish hearing them slurp, because it is the sound of, you know, them being alive. And in many ways, we can choose to see prison or paradise.
I have to type that again. We can choose to see.
Yes,
prison,
we see
paradise.
what we seek. Life can be prison or paradise, you choose, but we see what we seek.
Oh man, that's some beautiful wisdom and nuggets that you've just shared. I just want to post that one.
This is kind of the nature of why we call this the color matrix now, because that is the nature of the matrix itself. It could be the prison of limitations, or it could be the paradise of liberation, self-understanding, and self-acceptance.
Beautiful. There's one last question for you, and then I will wrap up our segment. Were you being ambassaded, or is this a coping deflection? Interesting question.
I would call it growth. You know, it's like I've done many things in my life as a coping mechanism, but in those ways, you know, it's a coping mechanism maybe initially. In the long term, it actually turns into self-development.
Yes.
It depends on, once again, this individual has such bright, brilliant blue tendencies. You know, which really comes into the engine, like the we're going to get to the bottom of this and we're going to dig deep. And ultimately, I speak that language all day. In my pursuit of digging through truths, facts, that kind of stuff, I have actually found that it has changed my beliefs. which this once again goes into my personality tendencies. I have a bit of a skew where I am more open to finding meaning in beliefs, but that reinforce my factual perception of life, and that could be why this particular framework helps speak to me. But I would probably say that, considering that, right now, if I'm being fully honest, like I have to take accountability for my bastard, because it is my dragon. There's this concept within all of us that we have this shadow, and that is that inner beast that lives within your cave. Now you can pretend that you don't have one and it's in the dark, and then all of a sudden it's going to jump out and it's going to eat people in your life, and you're going to go, wow, I really wish I'd worked to train my dragon. My dragon at this point works in a capacity where it breathes no fire. It just needs to protect its gold.
On that note, for me, I would say I want to wrap up with saying that I almost relate everything that we've shared today. Firstly, thank you. This has been super delightful, as I knew I was going to be in for a treat with listening to you, feeling your energy and passion that just shines through your openness to receive whatever comes your way. And for you to tame your inner dragon and to show and demonstrate how you've done that through sharing that very vulnerable experience with us. So I'm really grateful for you in coming on today. I don't think it's the last of us seeing you. We will have continuations. I had one particular guest that has been on 3 times. And in fact, we wanted sort of proof and evidence of where this works. And we invited her with some of her clients. I'll put that to you as an opportunity to consider. Maybe you'll bring Mom on.
She can make it. Yeah, she can make a cameo, and then also we can have you take the assessment, and we can discuss your specific colors. That's a kind of an opportunity to show as opposed to tell.
Love it, love it, love it. So what this reminds me of is also Michael Bernard Beckwith, Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith. I think he's in the States. So if you don't know him, go and find him. It's beautiful. He speaks about the 4 levels of consciousness. And the first level is, why is this happening to me? It's that victim state. It's where you are shaming that dragon, that monster, that inner villain, and that demon side of you. And then the second level of consciousness is really, how is this happening? Sorry, I'm just seeing more comments and I'm getting a bit distracted. I'll come back to that, Jeffrey. The second level is really, how is this happening through me? So there's an awareness that gets increased around, how am I the co-creator and co-conspirator of my reality in the way that I project or show up or transfer some of the things that Jeffrey said, or try and be in this controlling saboteur state, or in this hyper rational, which is really the blue color. And I mean, we can exchange some frame of references around how I would frame it as a saboteur. And I'm not claiming that it's mine. It's a company called Positive Intelligence. But I would love to see how the two merge together. The third one is really, it's not happening to me. It's not happening through me, but it's happening. I'm sort of one with it, right? So I'm at this point of, okay, I realize that I'm no longer the co-creator, but I'm going to be one with whatever. So there's acceptance, there's non-attachment to it. And it's almost a manifester stage of the different levels. You're able to manifest more from a place of your divinity than your scarcity and your lack. And then the fourth one is really coming back home to yourself. In the core essence, it's the center of this color wheel, being grounded. So I wanted to share that that's really how I summarized my understanding of this conversation, that this important dialogue today. And then lastly, I will share the blue side of Jeffrey coming through again. What role might fragmentation, splitting, and compartmentalization play when creating these rigid color frameworks? Might they be coping mechanisms that hinder adaptive growth? So whilst I'm seeing the blue color coming through, I'm also seeing curiosity. There's this level of curiosity.
Well, blue is all about curiosity. It does. I mean, it's
Yeah.
always going to be asking more questions. The interesting thing is that he's hitting on something that is actually very interesting and deep
Okay.
within the story of the tech. But my so there's always a desire to understand the aspects of personality. Most of the time, we're dealing with 4 quadrants
Yes.
that in which these colors emerge. I do like the addition of the extra 2, which allows for a wider range where these labels don't feel as so constrictive or
Yeah.
boxing in. But yeah, once again, like my encouragement would be to go on to thecolormatrix.com, create an account, and you can take the test for free initially to discover your top color. But then as you take the test in different contexts, you begin to see that the colors vary to such a degree actually in different contexts that it's hard to it's hard to not see it as being a better representation of wholeness as opposed to a splintering.
It's an ecosystem. I see it as an ecosystem, and they're
Yeah.
working together. I'm just going to read some of his other comments because I think that I'm really grateful for Jeffrey for your insight, your contribution, your really active participation. I do think it would be useful to connect with Corbin and to continue this conversation. And who knows what collaboration opportunities can come from this.
And I'm going to say it's your conditional bias affects your aura. So it's a little bit of both.
Yes. Okay.
He needs to message me on our Instagram at the Color Matrix. We need to hook you up, man.
Definitely. And then humans seldomly rest in any one somatic state. Totally agree. There's the book also, The Body Keeps Score. So that somatic state is very prevalent in that comment that you raised there. And then lastly, and we then need to wrap up, in this metaphor, do all of the branches coexist, working together to support an internal dynamics of the tree and its place in the environment? It's the whole ecosystem reference that I was making earlier on, and around thinking about all the elements and how that coexists in the growth and the robustness of this tree.
My short answer to that would be that one of the most important things to the warmth side of the color wheel is inclusivity. And it is one of the least important things to the strength side.
So on that note, please, Corbin, stay with me whilst I end the live. I usually do a debrief with all my amazing guests that I've had the privilege of hosting. So stay with us. Any last comment or closing remark I want to leave to you, and then I will end the stream and say goodbye to our guests and thank them once again for the participation, as well as if you do watch the replay and this was insightful, please reach out to Corbin if you have any questions as the subject matter expert in this regard. Last closing comments on your part?
Thank you so much for having me today. And yeah, if you are interested in improving your communication, reducing conflict in your personal or professional life, or repairing any fractured relationships that it may feel like it's beyond hope, I can assure you that it isn't. And I just invite you to visit thecolormatrix.com or check out one of the links to this. You can tune into this upcoming April 8th webinar. And then also we have a really wonderful book, The Personality Color Matrix, that is going to be available for pre-order. You can get it in that webinar link, and it comes out July 25th. And I hope that I get to be back here before then again to continue this conversation.
You certainly will be. On that note, thank you for being with us. Thank you for your insights and wisdom shared. Thank you for your support in this live stream every single week. And we look forward to seeing you again next week and to discover new heroes' journeys, and not only the hero, but how to embrace that dragon and tame that dragon and villain and demon, however you want to frame it. So on that note, I'll end our live stream. Thank you again.